Welcome to China Dispatches, the official podcast of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. This is Jacob Gunter, the Chamber's Senior Policy and Communications Manager. This episode is a recording of our Summer 2020 VIP webinar series, which featured government, business, and thought leaders from around the world having frank discussions on tough topics with Chamber President Joerg Wuttke. If you're tired of long speeches and looking for lots of back and forth, you've come to the right place. If you enjoy the conversation, have a look at our website and sign up for future webinars so you can enjoy them live and even ask questions of our speakers. Without further ado, let's jump right into the topic. The future of EU-China green collaboration.
Dear members, dear friends, again, this is a great pleasure. This is number 7 in a series of 8 webinars that we have started in May, celebrating the birthday of the European Chamber. And today we go green. Today we have the great honor to have the newly installed EU Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries with us, Mr. Sinkevičius. I'm so sorry, your name is really complicated. From Lithuania. And I try not to distort your name too often and too many times. And then, of course, we have Isabel Hilton, based in London. She has been covering China since forever. I will not name you the date, but she has published wonderful books on China. And what makes her interesting for us today is the fact, of course, she's running an internet platform called China Dialogue, which is possibly the best on environment in China. And then we have Mr. Green in China, Ma Jun, who has been associated with everything that matters in the environmental field. He wrote the first book on the water shortage 20 years ago, and he has been now developing websites which are mind-blowing. You can actually go on the websites and see how your plant is doing when it comes to emissions, and he possibly will address green choice. So we have a whole array of topics coming up, and I'm very happy that the 3 of you make yourself available. So for the commissioner, you have a tough job taking over the portfolio of environment in a time of a major economic hit. Are you worried that the ecology will be sacrificed because of the recession?
Good morning, everyone. Shortly replying to your question, I would say, first of all, that I think climate change didn't go anywhere. And with further trends of climate change, we can face even bigger difficulties to our economies, to our societies, even bigger than the COVID-19. So I think this is the measures we have to take. I'm very proud of the Green Deal, which here in the EU we accepted way before COVID-19. It's our growth strategy and growth strategy up to 2050, and we are sticking to it, and this is the way we're going to go ahead.
Can you just, for the sake of all of us who are based in China, explain briefly what is the Green Deal all about?
Okay, so I will. So probably before the crisis began, I would call it that we had our map for the future. The Green Deal is our flagship initiative, a strategy to transform the EU into a modern, source-efficient, and of course competitive economy. An economy with 0 net emissions, and of course, and by 2050. And most importantly, that the economic growth is decoupled from resource use. And of course, going through that transition, the key for us to complete it as a just transition, leaving no one behind. And it comes with many concrete actions and strategies to cover all the areas that needs change. So first of all, of course, strategies to decarbonize, to move to a clean and a circular economy, to restore and protect biodiversity, ecosystems basically, and of course to bring down dramatically pollution. So in March, as a part of the Green Deal, we adopted an industrial strategy. So that's already a huge step forward, I think, when many people speak about the Green Deal as sort of only environmental or ecological. There is a strong argument saying, no, it is not. It's a growth strategy. And here is a industrial strategy on the table showing the way we can move forward. And the aim is, of course, to use the green and digital transformation to empower industries and SMEs around Europe. And then the huge part of this industrial strategy was Circular Economy Action Plan, which is also already a reality now, which helps the whole cycle, the whole life cycle of products from design to manufacturing, consumption, repair, reuse, recycling, and of course, bringing resources back into economy. A few days ago, we adopted, I think, one of the grounds, the most important for the very, I would say, basic on which you're building the Green Deal. It's a biodiversity strategy, because you can't expect to have zero emissions or bringing down pollution without healthy ecosystem. Most importantly, that it also includes a strategy to make food systems more sustainable. Further ahead, we have also plans to enhance the sustainability of the use and production of chemicals. This, together with other initiatives, of course, relates a lot with, I would say, problems which Europeans are worried the most about. It's air quality, water pollution, and that's where the Green Deal is going to deliver on the zero pollution ambitions. We also have very important part in the Green Deal on oceans. The oceans feature strongly in the Green Deal, first of all, for energy production, clean energy production, food, and of course, industrial applications. Some of the most, I would say, revolutionary innovations will come from the blue economy, an economy that has sustainability clearly at its core and does not repeat mistakes that have been made on land. First of all, of course, over-exploitation. Very maybe shortly, couple words on Green Deal and green recovery, which you asked on the beginning, if I'm afraid. I think that's actually an opportunity. This crisis, of course, it's different from any other crisis. Like every crisis, the book will tell you. The most saddest thing that we lost many fellow citizens. But on the other hand, of course, this is also an opportunity to rebuild our economies cleaner, greener, and do it much faster. With amounts of public finances being injected into economies, I think that would be a mistake backtracking on a Green Deal or on a green transition. We can only foster it and move faster. So rebuilding the economy can be a tremendous opportunity. It only means that we can tackle climate change, regenerate nature, and build back a healthier environment. I'm a little bit impressed what's happening with the nature. 2-3 months in the nature means basically nothing to concerning any changes. But if you see how quickly animals, species felt that humans are not present, that they can sort of return back to certain lands, gives a good glimpse of opportunity that we can still rebuild and coexist in harmony. But most importantly, of course, stop devastating consequences of climate change. I can't hear.
I hope that you don't have wolves roaming the streets of Vilnius back home in this kind of lockdown. Isabel, you for decades have been the bridge between China and Europe, the green bridge, I would call it. How do you see the potential of, in a crisis like this, cooperating while basically we have agreed with China and Europe on the Paris Agreement? Both nations or regions have stick there. What kind of potential do you see between Europe and China on the Green Deal?
Well, yeah, good morning, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to catch up with old friends. And I think it's very important what the Commissioner, the scenario the Commissioner has just laid out. I mean, as we look at this very, very disrupted world, and we look particularly at the US-China relationship and all the difficulties which have beset it, and at the US administration's departure from the Paris Agreement, announced departure, and general hostility to environmental issues, I think the importance of the European Green Deal really can't be overstated. It's, as the Commissioner says, not only a statement of intent, but a blueprint. We've had an awful lot of statements of intent from the, the first Rio summit, back in the early 70s. And frankly, progress could have been faster. I'm not decrying all the work that's been done, because it's a very, very difficult thing to change the basis on which societies and energy systems and economies work. Not only do you have to figure out how to do it, but you have to overcome all the opposition to it. And that's why having a blueprint with an industrial strategy, with plans, and with the kind of power to mobilize the member states of the European Union, China's largest trading partner, is absolutely critical. Because as the Green Deal begins to set new standards and new approaches and new conditions for production and exchange, if China wishes to continue to be a good partner of Europe, China is also going to have to conform. And I don't see this as Europe telling China what to do. I see it as two very big and important entities aligning their interests, because in China, as you know, we have eco-civilization as a top-level policy, which is working its way slowly and with the usual difficulties through the economy, but will also change how things are done. To the degree that Europe and China can align these efforts, then you do create a very powerful engine. You create something which essentially sets standards in the way, for example, that the behavior of the state of California in the United States, California being the biggest economy in the United States and a very green state, California has been able to set standards which essentially mandate the behavior of the other states in the United States, because they want to sell to California. Now you get Europe and China creating an entity, a partnership like that, and they each have things that they can learn from each other. Then you have something very important. And I think it will affect some of the key issues that are of continuing concern in China. For example, greening China's overseas investments. China has embarked on this very large and dramatic set of a project for global development, Belt and Road project, and the difficulty with it is that the investments on the Belt and Road are definitely not green. And a lot of the way China spends its money is encouraging the wrong kind of growth, which at this point we really can't afford. So again, the kind of collaboration that you can establish between Europe and China on having common standards of what really is green. What is a green bond? What's excluded? Does it allow coal or not? All those nitty-gritty questions on which there is at the moment some divergence. Were they to be aligned would, as I say, create something very powerful. So that although, as the Commissioner said, we're in a very, very dire moment, it's also a moment when old habits and old ways of doing things have had to break down. We are living in a very, very different world, and it is to that extent, a tremendous opportunity to build back better, as they say, to create something which is really sustainable. And there are important lessons from this experience about how we treat nature and how nature, you know, nature can bite back, and nature on this occasion has bitten back. So let's not do that again. Joerg, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I have to, you know, I'm really looking forward to the time when I meet people really, and I don't have to unmute myself. Jim, it's Isabel said that, you know, Europe cannot tell China what to do, but where can Europe still inspire China? And to make that even more broader, where can China actually teach Europe something about green planning or green action?
Yeah, first I also want to join Isabel, you know, to say how such a pleasure to join this EU Chamber of Commerce celebration. You know, congratulations to you and to Joerg, particularly. I first met you, I think, nearly 20 years ago when we were put in the same panel. I think the past 20 years, when we look back, you know, I think China has come a long way on the environmental protection side. You know, at that moment, the economic development, almost like at the total expenses of the environment, but those have been very much changed. I think particularly the past 5-6 years, you know, since China started tackling the smog and the air pollution problem, and of course through all these years we've been hugely benefited by learning from EU, European Union, and from America, from Japan. I think there has been so much best practices and you know, all these laws and regulations, we simply just copy so much of them. And from you, you know, from the EU Chamber of Commerce, you know, through this trading relationship, much of these you know, the best practice of the European companies have also been, so much have been transferred. You know, I myself have the privilege to, you know, witness part of that, and we were so much benefited through that, you know, and at this moment, I think it's very much, I want to say, you know, I want to salute the Commissioner Sinkevičius, you know, by you know, for such an inspiring Green Deal policy. And as Isabel put it, you know, EU and China must collaborate. And this is a delicate, very delicate moment. You know, we used to have a whole new situation when so many countries for the first time in the world can come together to sign the deal, you know, in Paris, the Paris Agreement. And we thought that things gonna move forward, you know, with a global solidarity. But that has so much been undermined by the administration, the federal administration in the US. And so you can imagine, you know, for so many years, the global pressure is part of the reason for China to continue to go green. But now, you know, that has been totally taken away. There's no more pressure. And so we have to, you know, we have to do it ourselves. And we like it or not, we've been put on the driver's seat, you know, along with others. You mean, who can be the partner? I think only the European Union at this moment the two torchbearers and potential, have this potential. So we must collaborate on this, and EU continue to develop all this green policy, especially on the low carbon side. EU and now Britain is with Brexit, but still continue to focus on low carbon, zero carbon, emission strategy and net zero policy. So I think that part China needs to learn a lot continue to learn so much from EU. But on the other hand, China as the factory of the world, we have such a massive manufacturing, and how to manage this scale of industrial emission. I think China have developed some of its own ways. When we first met, I think you were one of the first audience to appreciate, to endorse my research. But in the meantime, you are also among the first to challenge me about how to solve the problem, how to address the problem. And we review the situation. We have laws and regulations copied from the West, but enforcement was not followed because we don't have a judicial system like in the West. Even now, it's still not quite there. Not like in the, we have laws. It doesn't mean that we can just go to the court to enforce it. So we have to find our own ways. I happen to believe that we have to find, to tap into the extensive public participation. Public, I don't mean just citizens. I mean just various stakeholders to join the efforts. Of course, citizens is important. So with that, 2013, when we have the PM 2.5 started to be monitored and disclosed, we launched the Total Transparency Initiative, and the government responded by requiring all these major emitters to disclose online monitoring data. This is the first time in the world for this to happen. Now, so far, we got more than 28,000 of them, having some level of disclosure every 1 hour or 2 hours for water. So for air, it's 1 hour. And this is quite unique. And based on this, we put this into a cell phone app, the Blue Map app, not just compile all this water, air, and soil information, but also all these major emitters put on the digital map, helping people to visualize, by color coding them. If they're not in compliance, they will be in the color red. And tens of thousands of people made their reporting. And this tap into, and they tag in the official Weibo account, making it file the micro reporting. And this has been accepted by the government and in many provinces. So far, more than 4,000 major emitters have, some repeatedly responded to the government, to the people's reporting. And among them, most are actually, many of them are state-owned enterprises. And so this is something that continues to move forward. And based on all this historic progress made in China on environmental transparency, we have also been able to, for the first time, based on big data, developed something called the dynamic environmental credit assessment tool. And this tool, it means millions of factories now get a color code: green, blue, yellow, and red. It started, the brands started using that, and now followed by even some of the largest state-owned banks. Even during this coronavirus pandemic, during this, we're helping them to run through tens of thousands of companies who want to borrow money from them. And so they started to weigh in. So I do see a real potential here. And I hope that the investors and the brands in Europe, especially the investors, could pay more attention to this, the financial institutions, because I do see, post-pandemic, green, we want to have a green recovery, but we face a real danger of something not that green. So we need the market to play its role. We are going to push that in China, and I hope that there will be a chance for us to collaborate with our European partners. Thank you. Thank you.
Joerg, could I just say that because Madhun is too modest to say it himself, how remarkable it is what he's done. You know, we started, I first met Madhun around the same time, I guess it was around 2006 when he was just launching ITE. And the key insight that, you know, if you think back to what China was like at the time, it was this develop first, you know, clean up later paradigm. And critically, there was an absolutely, you know, universal shortage of information, of data. And if you're not informed, if you don't know who's polluting you, there is no possibility of holding people to account. And as Madhun says, you know, holding anyone to account in China is challenging, shall we say, but without the kind of transparency that his organization and the people who work with him have managed to create in China, we would really not be anywhere close to where we are. It's just an extraordinary achievement. And this model of engagement, of non-confrontational engagement, you give people information and you shame, you know, you actually create accountability in repeat polluters, in people, companies who've got away with it for years. It's just, it's a very inspiring model. So I just wanted to emphasize what a difference this organization has made and what a difference Madhun himself has made.
Unmute myself. This is getting difficult. Isabel and Jun, I mean, China is at the forefront of technology gains, leapfrogging really in 5G and artificial intelligence and so forth. Jun, how do you see the kind of possibilities of artificial intelligence being developed in China in the green area, which then can help industry to produce more productively, cleaner and meaner? Because China is, people here have such a knack for gadgets and technologies, which possibly we lost a couple of years ago in Europe. So how do you see this playing out, this new technology gains in the green area?
Thank you. Yeah, AI can play such a, artificial intelligence can play such a big role in China's green development, green transformation. I think we want to, you know, China remains to be the largest factory of the world. This is going to change, but not in a very near future. So we're going to still continue to sustain such a huge manufacturing. And in this process, you know, we are a country which, you know, China is a country which doesn't have huge, you know, all these resources, and our environmental capacity have been, you know, overtaken already, you know, have been overtapped already. So causing a lot of air, water, and soil pollution already. So to address this issue, we need to produce, you know, lean, clean, and the most highest efficient way. And by doing, you know, to try to do this, I think eventually the artificial intelligence gonna really, I think, play its role. For many, you know, major industries, I know that many of them are doing that. Especially, you know, the huge, you know, in China we have the huge internet platform, all this e-commerce platform. Many of them are tapping very, very deeply into this artificial intelligence. So making their whole kind of a logistics and you know, distribution and their whole business model far more efficient. And this is going to reduce a lot of hopefully, energy and resource the consumption. And to us, we are just a small, much smaller scale. On a much smaller scale, we're also at this moment trying to tap into the AI technology, because unlike before, we started as Isabel put it. When we first met, we also met. We first met some nearly 15 years ago, I think. When she's kind of preparing to launch China Dialogue, and we happen to be preparing for our own organization. We two just emerged at the same year, so in a very interesting coincidence. And when we first met, at that time there was, as G said, not much data. The catch is not much data. The first year we only managed to compile less than 2,000 records of violations, but last week we just we reached the level. The number reached 1.7 million, and now with all this real-time monitoring and disclosure, every day we compile more than 1 million, sometimes between 1 million to 2 million pieces of environmental data. Even the top performing companies cannot follow. The top users cannot follow so much data. So we have to, by doing this, we have to, every day we're tracking some 5,000 sources, data sources. In China, there are progress made, but in the meantime, it's not kind of it's not a kind of a unified platform. It's bits and pieces here and there. So all this coming in a very different formatting, document. We have to read through them and try to pull out structured information, data. So this is our, all this we now tap into the artificial intelligence, which is very, very helpful. And our next step is to try to engage with millions of our users, our app users, by tracking for example, the garbage that they want to sort, the birds that they sight in their near their hometown or in the forest. And all this, we need artificial intelligence to help, just simply provide people with all these solutions. So I think there's a huge potential here. Thank you.
Jun, you have introduced the green choice model into China, meaning customers should only buy from companies that are not basically blacklisted or don't have a spot on your website. How has this been progressing? And Isabel, on your end, how do you see this acceptance in the population in order to actually pay attention to green labels and so forth? And the next question, of course, the obvious, are you worried about a green protectionism, that if you don't have that label, you cannot, for example, sell Chinese products into the European market? Whoever wants to go first.
I think, well, on consumer power, I think it's pretty critical. If you look at how did we make progress in other countries in the past? Because China's Industrial Revolution was the biggest and fastest in history, but it wasn't the first. Every industrial revolution made the same mistakes. It went for very intense linear extraction, dumping the costs on the public in the form of pollution, and slowly, as time went on, things get cleaned up, but it's very, very expensive to clean things up afterwards. It's much better not to pollute in the first place. And if you look at how this happened, it happened in other countries with a combination of powerful civil societies using often legal systems. And as Majun said, the legal system in China is very weak in this regard, although it's getting better. In public shame, Newspaper scandals, media scandals, targeting polluters, and finally consumer power. Now, of all those possible instruments, I think that consumer power in China is pretty interesting. And I think that it's something that we could probably be using to greater effect in the West also. I think that companies are becoming increasingly aware that their environmental reputation is something that really counts, particularly with younger consumers. And as you know, any business, any consumer-facing business is very keen to attract younger consumers because they have a longer spending life ahead of them than people my age. So, you know, what they think really counts. So that question of reputation and how we can leverage reputation into positive action is pretty critical. As far as green protectionism goes, I'm probably for it. You know, I think, why not? We have protectionism in all kinds of other ways. You know, we don't approve of companies that you know, go for modern slavery. We don't approve of companies that, you know, abuse the public good in other ways. I think that green protectionism is no bad thing. I mean, if it serves as an incentive, how do you otherwise deal, for example, with the free rider problem? You know, it does cost money to be virtuous, and you don't want to penalize those who are going green by allowing them to be undercut by those who are not going green. So, you know, of course, it takes regulation and it takes enforcement and perhaps it takes green protectionism to get things going. We don't have a lot of time. You know, every indicator that we look at, from biodiversity to climate to resource scarcity to every kind of pollution, you know, the dial is in the red. We really do need to get serious about this. And I think that all instruments, including border tax adjustments, need to be looked at very, very carefully.
Maybe, Jen, you can briefly explain to the audience, when you introduced Green Choice, you took on these typical SMEs like Hewlett-Packard and Apple, and how you managed to actually get them to get compliant. Maybe you just explain how you use market power in order to clean up the supply chain. And then, of course, I would love to hear your view on green protectionism.
Thank you. You know, China, at that time, you know, when we launched this Green Choice initiative in 2007, the backdrop was that China was the factory of the world, and we export all these products. But in the meantime, the waste got dumped in our backyards and causing a lot of contamination. And I trust that we need to try to resolve this problem in a collaborative way, you know, to try to put a spotlight on the total value chain, you know, instead of just, because many brands at that moment already claim that they want to go green. But in the meantime, you know, when we check with them, they're going to say that, look, in China, I don't know who are polluting and who are not, so we can just buy from the cheapest. And so, but we happen to started compiling the list, which has continued to grow. And I said that, look, we have a list. You know, when it comes to, for example, to Apple, at that time, you know, at the beginning, when we try to engage with 29 IT brands, linking each one of them with some polluting suppliers in our database. So we sent a letter to the CEO of each one of them, and after half a year, only they responded saying that we have a long policy not to disclose it, so we would not respond. And so that's how we started, have to delve deeper, and published 2 major reports, just highlighting not just the impact on the environment, but also on the health of the communities, and, you know, very severe problems. And so thanks to all this expression, you know, a voice made by the consumers, and some I remember very kindly, more than 1,000 of them wrote letters to Apple at that time. But you can imagine this is nothing in comparison to their database, to their user base. But still, you know, when the PR department of a company receive a lot of voice like this from the consumers, at least, you know, especially when it based on hard data, then, you know, you just eventually they responded, and after we published the second report, and eventually, you know, through this five-hour-long debates and discussion in the head office in Cupertino, and so finally they started to take real action. And I have to say I really admire Apple. You know, the moment that they decided to change, they really, you know, walked the walk. And so over the past 5 years, they continue to top our green supply chain CITI index assessment. You know, by not just tackling the tier 1, but continue to reach further and further upstream to tackle the you know, the raw material suppliers all the way, you know, from PCB to those metal processing, you know, all the way to aluminum manufacturers, and stop them from using any coal power. So this is pretty dramatic. And in the meantime, to try to tackle the hazardous waste dealers and a collective, you know, wastewater, you know, treatment of the whole industrial park. So along with other major, you know, brands, including Apple and Dell and Levi's, Adidas, and Marks and Spencer, H&M, and all of this. So they are taking their actions. And now the development, talking about development, we're happy to say some of the industrial, you know, some of the suppliers, they decided to be the run their own green supply chain program. So we have Esco, you know, we have Wistron, we have Flex, we have Avery, Foxconn, Sattery, you know, all these different manufacturers. They actually use the data to manage more suppliers than many of the brands who source from them. So, and another development is the industrial associations, including the you know, TSF, Together for Sustainability, and of course SAC, you know, and all these are many of them are taking action. And another progress is about the Chinese factories, not just the companies, leading companies, eyeing global, like Huawei and Li Ning, you know, TCL. They are already run side by side with the major global brands, but also some of the very local companies, like the real estate developers. A group of them have decided to, in their collective bargaining and sourcing, decided to tap into the data and motivate upstream suppliers, sometimes the upstream to the cement and iron steel level. And so this is also another progress. Of course, the IT technology have been playing such a role. We developed a solution called the Blue Eco Chain. It basically used to chain all this data, to chain all these different the brands and the suppliers. So the brands no longer have to police the whole system. You know, everyone can receive push notification if there's a new kind of a records or violations, and with a set agreement between them, the supplier is gonna more automatically resolve the problem. So through these efforts, the efficiency have been vastly improved. So over the past, you know, prior to the pandemic, every week it's more than 100 factories will be motivated through this process. So far, we got more than 11,000 suppliers motivated to address this problem. And talking about last point, very briefly on the protectionism. I think our whole efforts is to try to actually level the playing field. I think before it's actually an unfair competition. Those responsible companies have to spend efforts to take care of the pollution. And those who cut corners continue to be rewarded in the market. I think we have to change that. Otherwise, we can never win this battle in China and globally if we continue to allow this racing down to the bottom to continue to happen. Now, this stop is China. Who are the next stop? Now we have some of the neighboring countries showing interest. They actually, express their willingness to come to learn what's going on in China because they understand they probably gonna be the next stop. So I very much hope to work with European NGOs, American NGOs who are working in the ASEAN countries to help raise their capacity and develop a regional map. Thank you.
I think that was a promotion for the European Chamber stance on the environmental working group that we have. Isabel, first of all, let me say to the audience, you're going to be, get yourself ready for the questions. Jacob will screen them and then throw the question at Isabel and Jun. So we start after this round now. But Isabel, a question that personally interests me a lot. My company has been engaged in this alliance against plastic waste in the oceans. It was founded 2 years, I guess, ago in London. My personal experience is it was very hard to get Chinese companies to join that, chemical companies to join that. How do you see the progress in the fight against plastic in oceans?
Right now, there isn't really a lot of progress. I mean, there's a lot of effort, I think, going in, but I think it's going to require a much more systemic approach. China remains one of the major sources of plastic pollution. And that's because China is very big and is using a lot of plastic. You may recall that a year or two ago, China stopped importing waste plastic from Western countries. And that was actually it was an interesting moment because it uncovered for the consumer what was really going on with recycling. When people thought they were recycling their plastic waste, what happened to it? Mostly you sort your rubbish, you put it out, and you just trust the system to take care of it. What had happened was that China's industrial expansion in the 80s and 90s had been so rapid, it had really outstripped its demand, its capacity to produce plastic. And so importing waste plastic seemed like a kind of win-win. It meant that more advanced countries were getting the benefit of relatively cheap labor in China to sort the plastic, where it would then be put to good use. And in China, it was getting feedstock. But actually what it did, the negative side of the system, was that it meant that Western countries which were producing and using enormous volumes of plastic had very little incentive to deal with the issue systemically. And if you don't deal with plastic pollution systemically, you don't deal with plastic pollution. The problem is it's too cheap, there are too many different varieties, there isn't enough value in recovering it. The market really doesn't work with plastic. It's just one of those byproducts of the petrochemical industry that is super abundant, and we've never learned to deal with the fact that it's also super durable. Shipping it to China for Western countries was a way of making the problem invisible. Meanwhile, what was happening in China was that China was increasingly receiving contaminated bundles of plastic that it really couldn't do much with. That was then just being dumped in China. Conditions of recycling were pretty awful. And finally, China said enough. I would like to say that then produced a rethink of how we produce and consume plastic, but I think we're still really waiting for that. The immediate reaction was to find other countries that were willing to take plastic waste. And so you begin to see China's smaller neighbors drowning as China almost did in plastic waste, and the ocean plastic problem continues. I think we are going to, if you don't go to the top of the value chain and say, we need to limit plastic in terms of color, in terms of category, in terms of recyclability. We need plastic. We don't need as much plastic as we use. There are alternatives now which are being developed which are more genuinely recyclable than plastic has been. Substances made with potato starch, for example, that can be used and are genuinely recyclable. I don't think we should demonize plastic either, because if you look at the food chain and cutting down on food waste, plastic is hugely important. But we've managed it very badly because of this dispersed responsibility. And I'm not terribly encouraged yet by the progress that's been made since the recycling ban.
Let me just check. I was told the commissioner is still there. I don't see him. Hence, I never called him. Ah, there we go. All right. I'm really sorry, but as I couldn't see you, I thought you dropped out or something more.
No.
But what could
I'm here. I'm just.
Yeah. So
when the others start speaking, I'm switching off my camera and microphone not to overload the system, because usually when it's so many participants.
So I don't know, you listened into our discussions. If there's anything that you missed out to comment on, be it plastic waste, be it green protectionism, and all of the above, then the floor would be yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Many interesting thoughts, and I would maybe return to the very beginning of the conversation on cooperation and between European Green Deal, between European Union and China, because I think we can have greatest initiatives, but if they are on our own, we realize very well that we live not in a vacuum, and to deal with I would say global disaster like climate change, you need global solutions. So you can't act on your own. So I'm very much convinced that the more we cooperate with our international partners, the better and the faster recovery will be. And I think it's only a very good time to step up that effort of ambition. Despite those, let's say, different initiatives from different spots, they need to be coordinated on a national level, especially when we speak about a country like China, when we speak about the European Union. Without coordination, it's going to be very hard to move forward, because there will be definitely someone very ambitious, way ahead, and unfortunately someone who is not willing to move forward because it's just, dependency on certain, let's say, energy resources, which then makes very hard to make certain decisions. So here, helping each other would make, move forward much faster. And the Green Deal sees, of course, the EU as a global leader, promoting and implementing ambitious environmental, climate and energy policies across the world. But in practice, the EU often means basically everyone. Everyone's role will be vital. And by everyone, I mean, of course, people that actually bring the EU and other partners like China together. And of course, China is one of the Europe's most important partners, and I'm strongly committed to enhancing our cooperation, especially on environmental issues. There was a great opportunity to make this year a super year for oceans and biodiversity. Unfortunately, COVID-19 took the spotlight away, but I'm pretty sure in 2021 we will return with the even bigger wave. And I think it's been very encouraging and great to hear June speaking of different initiatives. It's very encouraging to see China taking significant action to tackle its domestic environmental challenges, of course. And my hope now is that China will take a very similar course to the EU and put green growth at the center of their new 5-year plan. And that would be a huge message to everyone. Ideally, I think we should be both ensuring a faster transition, first of all, to a circular economy, because resources puts enormous pressure on nature, but it's also extremely important when you speak about the independency of our SMEs, faster work. So to do this, we need to take advantage of course, global supply chains and work together on product design. And as you know very well, most goods end up far from their point of design and manufacture, and often on the other side of the globe. So we need, I think, to ensure, first of all, that design for circularity across supply chain, and that is what we are starting to see. The recent progress in adopting policies, basically, to tackle the plastic challenges, they actually accelerate progress towards circular economy and are a good example of China's commitment to green development. And that's how I want us to work together. I hope we can develop that kind of joint leadership now next year in Kunming. As I said, there was lots of hope and ambitious around the Kunming. I think we can go ahead with ambitious, using Paris moment, ambitious new framework for global biodiversity. And as we said, maybe biodiversity is not such a bad buzzword as climate change in general, but it's the core basic without you can't move ahead. And I think, we can enhance our collaboration on forests, as well as, of course, ensuring their domestic preservation, better protection in tropical countries through action to promote more sustainable supply chains and reduce the impact of our consumption. And this is what was touched upon, I think, quite a lot in this discussion. I think this is the most powerful tool, actually, the consumer power. Consumers become more and more aware of what they eat, what they wear, where it's going to end up, what damage is going to have to environment. And here in Europe, part of the circular economy action plan, part of the farm to fork strategies is actually to give consumers choices they deserve. Basically, through, first of all, of course, labeling that it's easily recognizable, readable, and consumer can make choices. And usually when we speak about it, everyone is not so optimistic, saying, oh yes, there is many different labels and consumer don't take enough attention to it. I would say it's wrong. Of course, if label is hidden somewhere, then yes. But when we, for example, introduced a simple initiative where on basic appliances, you see the energy efficiency, basically as eco-design, you see energy efficiency, consumers made their choices very clear. They went for energy efficiency, choosing A+, and so on. And that helped to save enormous amount of electricity from the beginning of introduction of eco-design. I think this is the way to move, to give even more choice to consumers, to read very well what impact one or the other product does and how it affects maybe biodiversity not here in Europe, but someone in Amazon forest. So I think in this endeavors, I must stress again everyone's role. As EU companies, they set a very credible example with the green policies that work in practice and offer good business opportunity. And I think companies can be our bridge with China and I hope they will be able to join us in advocating for greater ambition in their green policies for public and private sectors, and greening not only logo, not only company's label, but greening the whole company's supply chain. This is where the real change can happen.
I think that will go down really well with the companies here. So let's open up the platform for the companies to throw questions at you. Jacob?
Yeah, so we have quite a few questions, all kind of addressing the concerns about China and Europe's approaches to environmental protection with the COVID-19 and with the COVID-19 outbreak and the economic downturn. So I'm going to kind of condense some of these into a single broader question for all three of you. These questions mainly come from Albert Schie and our own Esther from the European Chamber. So we see, for example, in the 2 sessions work report, Premier Li Keqiang outlined about $60 billion for different kinds of pollution, as well as calls to upgrade industry, especially in steel, to be more low emissions. And then, of course, we see a lot of big commitments in the Green Deal in the EU. So the kind of combination of questions about these are, first off, how politically feasible are these with COVID-19 and the economic downturn coming with it? How affordable are these, especially in terms of the amount of debt that might come with it, at a time where, you know, a lot of member states and China are under quite a big debt burden? And also, are these sufficient to address the broader concerns around climate change? So hopefully enough for you all to chew on.
So who wants to go first?
I can very briefly reply and then kick in the discussion, but I think, you know, when we speak about the affordability, this is a very good angle to take. It's not a secret that clean technologies, they are usually more expensive, they're less developed to a broader consumer, and of course they might be more expensive to single consumers and to companies, especially SMEs. And this is what I said at the very beginning. I think that this is a unique opportunity to make that affordability coming down to earth. Every single basically region I know, if you read, they're going to drop huge amount of public investments into economies to rebuild economies due to caused by an asymmetric hit from the COVID-19 basically lockdown, and coming slowly from deconfinement and etc. So Europe talks about trillions of euros. Same goes with the United States. I haven't heard about China numbers, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to be less. Same goes to Australia and other regions. Then you have different development schemes where we all know very well that we have to help other regions as well to rebuild their economies, not to let the virus spread into other regions and so on. So there is huge amount of money to be spent, and the question is where and how we're going to spend it. And I think here comes a great opportunity to make those clean technologies more affordable, helping SMEs to actually install green solutions, go the green way, put them on the path on the green recovery, rather than basically rebuilding the status quo. As I said, step back would be a mistake, but rebuilding status quo and not making progress forward would be also a mistake.
Can
I think microphone is off.
You're muted. Yeah.
Go for it, Isabel.
Thank you. Well, I agree very much with what the Commissioner says. We in Britain have spent eye-watering sums of money so far, supporting people largely who can't work, a furlough scheme. Now we see large companies coming and saying our survival is in question, government help us. And so we are going to spend a lot of money. The question is, do we spend it in, for example, restoring everyone's ability to fly whenever they want? Or do we spend it perhaps making Britain's housing stock, which is notoriously inefficient thermally, more climate resilient, thus employing people and investing in a future in which energy will cost less? You know, that's a return on investment. So I think the argument about cost is usually an argument about interests. And you see, you know, polluting companies asking for handouts on the grounds of maintaining employment or, you know, maintaining economic activity. But I think that this is a moment to pause, as the Commissioner says, and look for another route. As far as China's recovery goes, I think that there were already some signs that the general direction or the impetus behind the greening of China was running into some problems, and there had been concerns about the intention, for example, of including coal in the next 5-year plan, which is not set in stone yet, but it seems quite likely that new coal-fired power stations will be in the next 5-year plan. And this, again, is pretty worrying. If you look at that on the question of affordability, you have to ask the question, if most of China's coal-fired power stations are running already below capacity and making a loss, why build more? And that tends to come down to arguments which are not so much about cost and efficiency as about employment and social stability and other social problems. So we haven't mentioned the question of a just transition, but I think that no plan really is going to be effective unless those who are negatively affected by it are looked after, are compensated, are supported, are retrained, are given new jobs and new perspectives. Otherwise, they will resist. Now, there's resistance at the company level, but there's also resistance, you know, at the local level. And as you know from Germany, Joerg, where the transition out of coal has not been straightforward. It's a tough thing to do, and where entire regions depend on coal and on mining, on the production and the use of coal. You won't manage that peacefully without a plan for those regions and for those people. So I don't think that when you ask about cost, it's never a straightforward issue, but it is often used, as I say, to disguise special interests rather than to look at the challenge in the round.
So Jim, the Beijing view.
Thank you. Yeah, I did hear the name of an old friend, Albert Jie. Yeah, how are you? You know, it's so good to catch up this way. It's such a challenging moment, and this is a challenging moment, you know, to all of us and to the whole world. And the National People's Congress finally convened in Beijing, and the premier used, of course, you know, in his report, give the priority to the economic recovery, to jobs, and to people's livelihood. That's understandable. I guess China gonna go first with this, and the whole world eventually gonna go like this. So back to our very initial discussion that, you know, as Albert asked, that during this downturn, can we still, you know, continue our environmental policy like before? I have to say, the past 5 years, we probably experienced some 3 years of the toughest, most stringent environmental management. But even before the pandemic, with the economic slowdown and with the trade war looming very large, the local government, many of them already try to call for a relaxation of all these tough environmental policies. And more recently, we started seeing, in some regions, creating even some local rules and policies to try to give an easy going to the, to those, to some of the factories, the local factories. And the government policy is to try to differentiate, to try to manage more in a more precise way. The premier, when he talked about the environmental protection, I think he did say that this year going to be the end year for the 3-year war against pollution and the battle to protect to bring back the blue sky. But he also emphasized the importance to make environmental management more efficient and more precise. I guess not like before, sometimes refer to the shutting down, one size fits all kind of solutions that may have bigger impact on the economy. So I think this is China is at some sort of a crossroad. So again, we should not try to depend only on the government, single-handedly try to drive this environmental sustainability issues, not locally, not globally. I think globally it's so difficult to try to enhance each country's voluntary commitment. We saw that in Madrid, before the pandemic, even the real failure then. I think the problem is when the US was not on board, and then all the countries have their priorities, other priorities. So I think, we need to realistically try to understand this issue. And I very much like the EU, agree with the EU policy to try to tap more into the power of the corporations, the market. Commissioner, he said that EU companies can be bridges to China. I think it's more than that. I do agree with that, but I hope it's going to be more than that. The corporations, I hope, could take a more important role, play a primary role. I think there's a possibility like that. A group of NGOs have developed, I think Isabel knows about them, the science-based target to try to help all the brands to calculate the upstream embedded carbon, in their supply chain. When we developed our own index called Supply Chain Climate Transparency Index. I mean, this SCTI index also help, we use that to assess performance of more than 400 brands, local and global. And we can see many of them have 60 or 70% of their carbon footprint over the supply chain, and not many of them at all have incorporated that into their target setting. And much less of them can do anything about the vast carbon footprint in China in their supply chain. So I think, we do see this as gaps, but we also see this as a huge potential. We all say we want to help the medium, small companies, SMEs, and this is a way for the brands to use their sourcing power to differentiate. I think this is going to be a great help to them. And in the meantime, the banks financial institutions, more than 10 of them, we started collaborating recently. This gives us a lot of hope, because in China, the priority may be shifted to economic recovery, but the government led by the central bank and the Ministry of the Environment and Ecology, continue to push for the green finance. And so recently we have more than 10 major banks started collaborating, and some of them have adopted our platform to drive hundreds of their clients to disclose quarterly of their carbon footprint. I think everything got to start with measurement. All the management got to start from there. If you don't have the facility level data, you cannot tap into the market. You cannot tap into the green finance, and it's very hard for the consumers to make their choice. So I do see this, as a great example, great possibility. Finally, to this coal issue, I think in China the idea is people. Isabel mentioned about social stability and employment. I think it's also energy security. This geopolitical situation make that a very good argument or excuse, to try to work more on the coal side. And but in the meantime, I hope that people can see the vast potential of the renewable. Recently the costs have already dropped by 90% with solar, and significantly on the wind side. And I talked with some of the major suppliers in the manufacturers in China. They said they have the potential for another 90% drop of the cost. It's already some of the renewable power plants is cheaper than the coal. And I hope that we can all see that possibility and try to work on the policy side, on the market side, to try to remove the bottleneck and break the bottleneck and hope the renewables getting more easily adopted. Also, to respond to all this storage problem and energy security problem with that.
All right, thanks, Jim. Jacob.
Yeah, we have a question for the commissioner. Again, related to the COVID-19 outbreak and how it's impacting specifically the Green Deal. So essentially, will there be any effect on the timelines or the implementation priorities of the Green Deal? For example, will certain goals be sort of readjusted in the short term and then be compensated more, or compensated to be set higher, maybe 5-10 years down the road? Are there any plans to make these kinds of changes?
Very good question, which I received quite a lot at the very beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I can only reassure that we are on track with all the initiatives, all the which we planned under the Green Deal. As an example, for example, biodiversity strategy, which was adopted last week. Now, of course, lots of focus and effort on the recovery plan, which again is going to be quite a lot interlinked with the Green Deal. We moving forward with the climate pact, with public consultations and so on. So all the actions and initiatives are on track. Of course, we are flexible at looking and depending on the situation, how different things can be implemented. But when we speak about legislation, about different initiatives, we are on track, and I don't see really any reasoning to move away. I think what I was saying quite a lot in today, that there is lots of potential that Green Deal can be implemented on the ground faster than we expect. And this is not in our timelines, of course. We can foresee in our timeline certain legislation, certain changes, strategies, and etc. But of course, the part which matters the most and which excites me actually is the implementation on the ground. And here I think we have an opportunity with the recovery plan being introduced tomorrow with different initiatives under it and linkages with the Green Deal. With other continents and countries around the globe trying to restart the economies, there is a potential that Green Deal basically is going to be implemented much faster, and it will a lot depend on the government's abilities to see certain opportunities down the green recovery path. And then, of course, we might look for further ambitions. But one of the things which maybe I would like to mention at the end, we shouldn't be fooling ourselves that we currently see drop of air pollution. We see sort of a better shape of ecosystem. It's only temporary. We have to understand very well that as soon as the economies are back on track, everything will be back to previous levels, and we have an opportunity to shift it quite a lot on a green recovery path, and not to return back to those same levels which many citizens of the European Union, but I'm sure around the globe, were extremely concerned about.
Okay. Jacob, last question, I guess, time-wise.
Yeah. All right, so we've got another one that's kind of a combination of a couple people. First from Peter Korn from the Shanghai Environmental Working Group, as well as from Holger Handelwang. So they're talking about different ESG, so environmental, social, and governance-related issues, and the standards surrounding them. So things like green certificates, climate-friendly standards, things like this. First, how effective are these for helping to kind of shame consumers and producers? But also, is there a reasonable approach that we can expect to see success with for helping to define these sort of standards globally, or at least more broadly, rather than just within the EU or just within China?
So maybe Beijing first, huh, Jun?
Okay, thanks for this question. I do believe that this idea of green labeling, can play such an important role, because eventually, we call our program the Green Choice Initiative, because we, as environmentalists, we can't, dominate. We can't just say that people decide for the people how to do it, but we can give them the choices to do it, to understand the consequences, to make their own choices. And but people must have the information, must be informed, and it's very important to have those credible labeling. By credible, I mean that particularly in China, because Chinese people can be quite, sometimes not, ready to accept a lot of things, and so they have suspicion of things, and so how to make it more credible? At this moment, the labeling side is still very much dominated by the government-affiliated agencies. I think we need to broaden that. We need to involve more credible organizations to work on this. And I do see the potential to tap into the new technology. I talk about the eco chain. It's actually follow the very much based on this idea of blockchain. It's quite something that distributive accounting, and then only the credible sources can make those make some changes, and each one is an equal path. And so all of this, I do see the potential to build this massive accountability system Isabel mentioned about accountability system. It's important, yeah, that's one of the targets that we try to achieve in China, to really hold the parties accountable. And now with this new technology, it's very much, we make it traceable, through the total value chain. And at this moment, it's more on the quality side, on the food safety side, but I think on the environmental performance side, there's also possibility to achieve that. And so at this moment, every day, I'm looking at a template. I can understand, among all these thousands of companies who made commitment to address problems instantly when that happened, who achieved that, who failed that, and all the parties who pay attention, they actually can receive a reporting saying that how much of your clients or of the company who want to borrow money from you fail the standard, and how with the brands, it's the suppliers, and all this feed into a dynamic environmental credit assessment system. So I hope that eventually, if we don't want to limit this to China or simply to EU, we can try to broaden that. We can talk about standardization. And I think now finally, when the largest, I think when China's kind of used to be a black hole of the data, but now, it's very much different. So I think it created an opportunity for not just for China to join this global game, but for China to demonstrate to the new emerging market countries, to the developing countries, that this is doable. We have delegations who, if it is not for the pandemic, delegations from Vietnam, from India, they are not just NGO delegations. Some of them are ministry officials, because they also want to learn what's going on here, how to manage, especially on the real time, all this new technology. So I do see a possibility for this to happen on a regional or even global level. So I hope that today, I can work with the EU Chamber of Commerce. Together, we all trust the people. We all trust the market power, the market-based solution. So let's try to use that in a smarter way to empower green development. Thank you.
Isabel.
Yeah, I think these are part of a series of instruments that are emerging to motivate and change behavior. Thinking back to 10 years ago, environmental concerns were pretty much siloed. So you had, for example, in government, you would have the Ministry of the Environment, but outside the Ministry of the Environment, the Ministry of Finance would be thinking about the environment, or with the Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Agriculture, maybe a bit, but not very much. So where we've got to now, I think, is that we need to build in, and increasingly we are building in, climate and environmental demands into the operational elements of every ministry, every industry, every commercial operation as standard. How do you change a system unless these become the kind of bedrock assumptions on which you operate? So these are operational questions. How do you assess, measure, judge those operational questions? And how is the consumer to judge your performance against these standards? Well, through things like certification, as Majun says. There's a great deal of consumer confusion at the moment over any number of things, from plastic recycling, which we've discussed, but also the question of what is more environmentally responsible in terms of food miles, or, it's complicated. How to make the right environmental choice isn't straightforward, and you need as much data as you can. That is greatly assisted by standardized measures and standardized certification, so that it at least takes the effort out of the consumer choice to some extent. So I think that if for example, excuse me, every company were to measure every decision against Paris, is it Paris compliant? Do we have a net zero by 2050 target? If so, how does this decision help or hinder our progress towards that target? That's a fundamental operational requirement, which begins to transform how you do it. Then you have to look at how you find ways to do it, how you find ways to meet the target, and slowly the assumptions about how a company operates are transformed. And I think it's the same in all manner of environmental protection, from deforestation to wildlife trafficking. There are systems which look at this and which try to associate companies and individual consumer choices with those measures. Is this fish sustainably caught, before I eat it? Is this piece of furniture from sustainable timber? There have been a lot of problems with these systems, largely over their credibility and how rigorously they really are policed, whether they're just greenwash. But I think that, if you're building a new way of doing things, you're going to have teething troubles. I can see these becoming actually much more salient and much more important, and with much stronger teeth as time goes by, because otherwise I don't really see how we do make progress and how we harness all the potential of the market to enforce progress rather than to oppose it. So I think that they're really important. I just wanted to go back to an issue in the earlier question, which I think we didn't really respond to, which was whether the decisions that are being taken now are sufficient for climate mitigation. And the answer is no, we are way, way, way off target. And even in Paris, we were way off target. Paris was about getting everyone in the tent, with the assumption that the pledges would radically be tightened in 5 years' time, which is the COP, which was meant to happen, the Conference of the Parties, which was meant to happen at the end of the year in Glasgow. So far, we remain lamentably behind schedule, and there is just a very, very big emissions gap that we have to close, and the time is beginning to run out to close it, which is why the question of measuring every action by government or industry or commerce against Paris becomes really, really important. And I think that should become the standard question that we ask of every shareholders meeting, of every company report. That has to be built into our expectations of performance.
Thank you very much. First of all, we've reached 90 minutes. The soccer game is over. You scored mightily, so thank you very much. And I would like to wish the Commissioner every luck in this possibly most important portfolio in the Commission, most important for us companies and consumers. And I hope that we can welcome him here in person in China in order to maintain this kind of communication. Also, I would like to thank Isabel again for contributing. And please, I really encourage you, go to the wonderful platform, China Dialogue, and check it out. I can only encourage you. Then, of course, Jun, here at home turf in Beijing, good luck with your NGO and good luck with chasing companies in order to become greener and meaner.
Thanks for listening to our webinar Playback series. We hope you enjoyed the content and that you're eager to listen to the rest of the episodes. Thanks as well to our guests, Chamber President Joerg Wuttke, and my colleagues Zhang Yichi and Gao Rui for handling the editing and content on the back end. This has been Jacob Gunter at China Dispatches, the official podcast of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. Thanks for listening.